All right. So, welcome everyone. We're really excited to have you here. Glad you made it and found your way. And so many of you were so prompt, so early, which is awesome. It's kind of rare. So, yeah, Jill and I want to talk a little bit today and just hear from you and have a conversation about change. I guess really broadly, but um, kind of what we had when we just met and said, hey, what would be fun to talk about? What would be helpful for people? Like what we love to talk about and what we've written a lot about is our own change, and we'll share some of that. But Jill and I have both had some pretty significant change over the years, some of which I think was gradual. Probably most of it was pretty gradual. Some of it was maybe a little less gradual, a little more sudden. And all or most of it, and you tell me, Jill, if this makes sense to you, if this is true for you, but I think all or most of it, like what's kind of interesting and exciting about it is that we weren't really doing anything to make it happen. So like, I don't want to say it was accidental. It's not like it was completely random. Now, in hindsight, like when we look at some of the ways that we've changed and some of the things that have happened, we can look back and it makes some sense. So and that's what part of what we'll share here. It makes some sense, and we can see how or what was sort of going on under the surface in some ways to encourage that change. But it wasn't like we set out in these things and said, okay, I'm going to follow this 7-step strategy and I'm going to have this change at the end. We probably both, I know I certainly tried a lot of that, and that change never stuck. But so, we might have tried those things, but in the bigger, deeper, more sustainable change that we've both had, it wasn't that way. It just sort of happened. And so it's interesting because people ask us a lot, and I think it's just the most common, natural question in the world. I'm sure everyone's asked this. Well, how did this happen? Or how can I have change? Like, how am I going to get from here to there? And all of these questions, like how and why, and tell me what it looked like and how it happened, we're bombarded with them all the time. And again, we've probably asked them ourselves a million times before we kind of saw a little more about this. So it's a really natural question to ask, very human question. But we thought that'd be kind of a fun thing to explore is, you don't always know how. And do you even need to know how? And like we're saying, we didn't know how our change happened, and we didn't set out to make it happen, yet it definitely happened. So, it sort of brings into question this whole thing of like, wow, isn't it interesting that our minds always want to know how, and tell me what to do, and tell me the steps, and tell me what you saw. But I don't know, like that stuff doesn't actually seem to be necessary. And so we want to share a little about that. So I don't know, Jill, do you want to kind of maybe kick it off, and like maybe it makes sense for you to tell us a little bit about some of the change you've experienced, and I can share some of mine and kind of take it from there?
Sure, that would be good. Yeah, like what you were just saying about the how, and having things not, having us not really know how, things just happen. Like like you said, we could reverse engineer it. I mean, I could, and stuff like that, and say, and make steps out of it and stuff like that. But the problem is, I think, is it doesn't, that's my change, my stuff that changed is not necessarily what's going to help somebody else. So like for me, I wasn't even looking to change really, or I did set out, my original goal was just losing weight, which I did, old fashioned means of losing weight, and but it was after that, with learning this inside out understanding and stuff that we talk about, that things just changed, like and so for me, I didn't even realize I was anxious. I knew I sometimes would get anxious. I knew I was shy. I knew I was an introvert, but I don't know if I would have described myself as an anxious person. And yet, when that anxiety was mostly gone, I still get anxious at times, but it's not like something I'm living with constantly. Like, it was like, how'd that happen? Like it just disappeared without trying. And so, yeah, it's really difficult when people then ask you, okay, well, how'd you do it? What did you do? And yeah, so anxiety, my anxiety level, I had a low level of anxiety just constantly in my head. That sort of mostly went away. And then it seemed, because when that sort of went away, like just addictions and stuff just fell away as well. And again, I mean, I guess I kind of knew I always knew I had an addictive personality. I would have told you that. But like, just to have these things disappear, it's so cool. But it's frustrating as a person trying to help some other people, because you can't, they don't want to hear, oh, don't worry, it'll just fall away, or whatever.
Yeah. So, like for you, I mean, does it kind of feel like a lot, like you said, a lot of that you weren't even really trying? And does it kind of seem like it was pretty gradual in a lot of ways? And then you just sort of realized at some point or at various points, like, whoa, I'm not drinking as much anymore, or I'm not feeling as anxious anymore?
Some of it. I think the anxiety seemed gradual, I guess, because it wasn't like a overnight thing. The drinking thing was more. I mean, it had started gradually only because I had already, when I was trying to lose weight and stuff like that, I wasn't drinking quite as much, so that may have helped with that just in general. But that was more like one day after having an insight like that, just kind of, I just didn't want to, I didn't want that buzzed feeling anymore. But yeah, the anxiety just, I couldn't tell you when or how or whatever with that, how that just fell away.
Yeah.
And I know you've, experienced similar stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like that for me too, especially with anxiety, is really similar. So I was really anxious at one point and in all kinds of therapy and doing all kinds of things, and none of them really helped. Um, like looking back, I can see my anxiety kind of changed forms. So it was sort of changing really gradually all the time. Like it would take different shapes, if that makes sense, or manifest in different ways. But it definitely feels like a gradual thing, and it wasn't, there was never anything like, oh, I'm going to take this course on anxiety, or I'm going to, go to this anxiety therapist, that I could ever at that point even look back and say, oh yeah, that was helpful. Not that none of it was ever helpful, but it wasn't like, oh, that's the thing that did it. It kind of just fell away. And same with my binge eating habit. And then it sounds crazy, but it was like, it was such an issue. And there were some insights I had and things that I saw, and some shifts I felt. But in terms of the behaviors and just the way life looked and stuff, I mean, it just kind of stopped. There wasn't a behavioral plan. And you mentioned that too just a second ago, that you had an insight and kind of didn't want to drink. You didn't want that buzzed feeling as much, but there wasn't like a behavioral thing. So maybe that's an interesting place to go. So it sounds like for both of us, we can sort of point to some insights we had that seem like they preceded the change. And I say it that way, I'm kind of hesitant to say it that way, because I think really, like, we don't really even know what leads to change. A lot of
Right.
times, like we could, like you said, we could reverse engineer it. So we can look back and say, oh, I had this insight, and then a week or a month later I was done. And we want to connect those things, but we don't know that for sure. But we can kind of guess that there's some connection there, but we never really know for sure.
And that's the danger in talking to other people, because then they're chasing insights.
Yes.
That's the how to, is to have an insight. But like, yeah, I had like 2 or 3 really big insights that definitely, made obvious changes. But I get insights every day, all the time. Like, I just hear a little something that maybe in a video I listen to, and I just like, huh. And then, you never know what will happen from there. And then suddenly, weeks later or months later, I'm folding my underwear, like we were talking about
Yeah.
before. Which I'll just mention that, because that's like this same kind of thing. And it has no real bearing in the world, but like, I posted this on Facebook, in a group, recently, where I just found myself recently. I mean, it's probably been a month or two that I've been doing it. I used to think folding my underwear was stupid. Like it was like, who cares? It's just me. It's in my drawers, in my drawers. And And I didn't care. I mean, and so I just used to throw them in my drawer after I take them out of the laundry. And then suddenly I just one day I was just folding them when I was doing the laundry, and I haven't stopped since. But that's like, it just seemed like so nice now to have these nice folded laundry. Like, so those are the kinds of changes. You know, I didn't have an insight about my laundry, about my underwear. Like, that's what's so cool about this stuff.
Yeah. I still do not fold my underwear, but yeah, I mean, it's a,
Someday, you too.
I might.
I'll give you the how-to.
I might. I'm definitely not going to work on that one if it happens still. But no, that's so true, because like I was thinking about this for this call, and you know, a lot of times when people are asking, well, how? Tell me how. Tell me how. They're wanting to know. They're kind of really asking one of two things. One, what did you do? And that's, you know, that's kind of the first question. If there, maybe if you've been in this conversation a little bit, or you're a little more enlightened, the question, instead of what did you do, it's tell me about your insight and how do I get one of those myself? Like, what did you see that made you, you know, like helped you lose a bunch of weight, or made you start folding your underwear, and how do I get that? And like you said, I mean, that's just kind of a more enlightened, fancier version of a how question. And like, there is no real answer to that. You know, insight is just new thought that we have all the time. So I think, I don't know, tell me what you think about this, but to me, it just sort of seems like as we started looking in whatever way that was happening, as we started kind of seeing more about how we operate, like what's true of us, what our experience is made of, all that kind of inside out stuff that we study and share, we just, like, things just looked and felt different. And change, kind of, just because change is our nature, we're always changing, and we're always wanting to change. We're always like evolution is just sort of part of our design, and change in positive directions is part of our design. That, like, for whatever reason, as we started to see more about this, we stopped getting in the way. And again, now I know that can just bring up a million questions too, of like, well, how did you do that? How were you getting in the way? But it's just kind of like, you know, I always imagine it as like change is wanting to happen all the time. But when we're in our heads and we're thinking and we're asking how and why, and we're trying to make it happen, it's kind of like we're putting a thick layer of ice on this river that's flowing, you know, and it's still flowing because that's what it wants to do. That's how it's designed to be. But we're just kind of slowing it down a little bit. And we're doing that innocently, obviously. We just want to speed it up, ironically. We want more of it for us, and we want to figure it out. And we're kind of in this misunderstanding that we need to play a role in our change. But the more we kind of see that we actually don't, because change is our nature, the more we tend to just sort of relax, and change kind of happens.
Yeah, because we can't think our way into change, it seems. You know, you can't, that becomes like a willpower thing, and we all know how well that works. You know, I mean, willpower is great for, you know, short bursts of time. You know, you can think your way into doing something for a short amount of time, or, you know, just like with dieting or anything like that, you can will it, and that's your thinking. I mean, that's all thought. Okay, you know, I'm not going to eat this, or whatever. I'm only going to eat this. I'm going to exercise every day. But then we get tired of it, and it just doesn't work. But with letting that go, and letting go of the controls a little bit, because I mean, that's one thing I'm just seeing more and more. We really just don't have control over pretty much anything, you know, that we think we're controlling all these things in the situation. But the more you let go, like your thoughts and your crazy person in your head, like I always say, the more you stop, you know, listening to that, and just letting the river flow, like you say, stop putting that ice on top of it and let it float, things will change. It's again, you can't explain. It's really magical. I mean, it sounds crazy, but there's a magicalness about this, that things just change. It's like you just, maybe an insight could just be something simple, that you just see something that you had been doing all along, how you had been stopping yourself all along, and just seeing that, sometimes it just stops then, or you stop trying to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, it does feel kind of magical because I think we're so caught up in like, we need to make things happen. And this is truly something that's happening, wanting to happen all the time, that we don't need to have any role in. So when it happens for us, when we get out of the way and it happens for us, it does feel kind of magical. And at the same time, because everything we share is kind of like both ways, like, it has this side and that side, like, it's magical, but it's also the most practical thing in the world, in a sense, and commonplace thing in the world. So it's like, I always think of, how grandmas everywhere are telling their grandchildren, like, oh, just go sleep on it. You'll feel fine in the morning. Like, they don't dig into every little thing. It's like the kid's worried about something and everyone intuitively knows, go take a nap and that's going to fix it. That's as magical as what we're talking about. So, big change, like not having anxiety anymore, and dropping habits and addictions and things like that. It's no different than exactly the mechanism, if there's a mechanism at play, as oh, you have a lot on your mind, or life looks really hard, go take a nap or go to sleep, and it'll look different tomorrow. Because what's happening in both cases, right? Really, in both cases, it's exactly the same. We're so in our heads. We're just thinking so much, and we're trying to solve our problems with our thinking, usually. So we're thinking about the problem, thinking, how do I fix the problem, which is just more thinking, why do I have this problem? What am I going to do? And because we just feel the thought that shows up in our minds in any given moment, that's literally all we ever experience, is moment to moment to moment. We feel thought coming through us. When naturally, when that thought is all about, I have this huge problem and it's big, and how am I going to get out of it? That's all we get to experience. But when we don't worry about that, it might still be there because we can't control our thoughts. But when we don't worry about it, we don't pay so much attention to that, that thought changes, that just flows through us. We relax a little bit. And again, it's like going to sleep or taking a nap or taking a time out, and then suddenly you do feel better and things look different. And it's so practical too. It's not just like, oh, don't worry about that. Go rest and don't worry about the problem. It's really true that when we're not busying our minds trying to figure out how and trying to figure everything out, we actually get to see real solutions.
Right.
Like helpful ones.
And so often it's not a problem, like you said. I mean, yes, sometimes problems are still there, but so often something we thought was a problem isn't, after sleeping on it or whatever. It's like when you answer that email when it first comes in, that somebody's angry or something like that, and you reply back so quickly, and you just end up in a big fight or something. If you looked at it, if you just went away and looked at it later, you might see that in a different way, that oh, they weren't really being mean, or they or whatever. And you just that little time away from your initial conditioned thoughts, like, it makes such a difference. And that's why we do have those phrases like "go sleep on it" or "this too shall pass," and those things, because it's true. It's really true.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting because it kind of brings you full circle to where how can look like a question we have to actually answer at one point, and it can look like a big problem because you need to know how. I mean, I needed to know how to end my binge eating habit, and I did not know how to end my binge eating habit. So that was a huge problem for a long time, or it looked like one. To it kind of coming full circle, well, how, that if your mind's full of hows and it looks like a problem, that can almost be like your best friend. That, in a sense, that's just showing you, oh, I'm in that really busy mind place. What I need here is to let my mind settle down, go sleep on it or whatever, just let that move through, not worry myself, get all tangled up in all those how questions. And then in that deeper place, beneath all that intellect and concepts and our mind trying to figure it out, that's where we do it. Like Jill said, it either doesn't look like a problem in the same way, or if it is an actual physical thing in the world that needs to change, like that's where we're going to have some helpful thought or new idea about it.
Yeah, and even that, I mean, I I've had major insights even being totally caught up in my head too.
Yeah.
So there's not even a how to for that. Like, okay, now how do I quiet my mind? That because
Yeah.
that becomes the next thing. But I had some, one of my biggest insights was just when I was so angry and stuff, and then just read a few words randomly that an email had come in, and it whoosh, just all went away, and I felt nothing but unconditional love for the person I was totally mad at before. So there's not even any rules with that too. You can get it, you just can see it differently at any time. It's quite cool.
And there's no how-to to that, because we're just talking about how we work. And
Yeah.
every single person in the universe who's ever lived works in the same way. So this has nothing to do with any of us here on this call, or like special people that know certain things. I mean, this is just a universe. It's like how we're all designed.
Yeah, which is neat. It's because every single one of us on the call, every single person in the world, no matter what's happened to you in your past, no matter what's going on now, you have it's inside of you to see things differently, because that's the way we work, like you said. That's how we work, and it's not you, like all the stuff going on in our heads, all that how to's and all that stuff. That's not really you. Like, we are the people. We are the I don't know, the entity, or I can't even think of a word to call it. That, what's underneath all that thinking, all those how to's, all the stuff your psychiatrist told you, underneath all that stuff that you're trying to do, that's who we really are. And that's the natural state underneath us. That's where the feel, the better feelings come from, because it's there. It's always there.
Yeah. And we're always feeling that, more or less. Like, we're always in thought, and then the thought settles down and we feel that bigger consciousness that is who we really are. Like, so there's no how to and how to get more of that either, or how to feel more of that. I mean, it just is, and it's always there. And we don't always experience that firsthand or feel that it's true for us in any given moment. And that's okay. So again, it like just kind of taking all that we're sharing so far and just seeing, okay, yeah, there is a design to us that encourages change, that wants change to happen. And it happens completely on its own. It's the most natural thing in the world. And the more we can just relax and know that happen. That's why we teach about this or share it so much, because we want to, like, when you get a feel for the fact that this is your design, you just do relax, and you just do, it just does work nicely.
It's the trusting that too, like, just once you really have a trust in it. I mean, it doesn't mean you're never going to feel these things or be anxious or whatever, but when you trust it, because you just know it's the way things work, like, that alone goes so far, because there's just that crack in the windows, open to know, okay, this is, I know, I can't see, I don't know why, I don't know how, and I don't know how this is ever going to end. And but that little piece of you knows it will, because you trust it, and this really is how things work. I mean, Amy and I can both say 100% certainty that this is how it works, which is always why I also tell people, to seek evidence for it in your life, in little silly things, how feelings are coming from thought and not from situations and people. Like just look for it in life, and then you just become more and more convinced, until you just know it in your bones that that's the truth. And then you don't need how to, because you know it.
Yeah, exactly. Just, that's perfect. Should we go to some questions?
Sure.
Open it up for people. Okay, there are a few that have been put in the chat, so we can start there. But again, if you guys want, feel free to use your little raise your hand feature, or like I'll read a couple of these, and then in between, just unmute yourself if you want, and we are happy to share. It doesn't have to be just questions either. Again, anything that you just want to chime in and share your own change, or what you've seen around this. We'd love to have that kind of conversation. So Deborah asks, I've gotten into the principles. Since I've gotten into the principles, almost stopped getting anxiety, which is amazing. But this has been replaced by stomach pain. Had lots of tests and they're all clear. So my question is it possible my anxiety has changed into pain? Um, sure, sure, it's possible. Like mine did that for sure. Like it felt one way, and then it kind of, and I see that a lot because we kind of get onto it. Like if you're used to anxiety feeling a certain way, and then you see, oh, like that's just anxiety, or that's just my mind creating the same thing again. It's all, I don't know if you experience this, Jill, but it's almost like you get a little bit onto something. But then our mind is really sneaky sometimes, so it'll like have it show up in a slightly different way. So yeah,
So sneaky. Yeah, like that ego mind, or just our thoughts, or whatever you want to call it, is so sneaky that way. It like anytime you catch on to it, it's amazing. It's like really smart
yeah,
and sneaky. So yeah, it's still probably the stomach ache. There's probably thoughts, subconscious thoughts somewhere, that are that you just can't, you're not aware of, which is okay, which is fine. But if you're feeling anything like that, it's, especially if you had it checked out with the doctor, um, yeah, then that's still anxiety, or I mean, you don't have to label it that, but it's thought in the moment somehow causing it.
yeah. I mean, and just seeing like that's not bad news, Deborah. I mean, it doesn't mean like, oh, you still have anxiety. You thought you didn't. Like, no, it's just the way thoughts showing up and moving through you in a moment. That's all it is. So again, like you used to label it anxiety when it showed up a certain way. Now your mind is wanting to maybe label the stomach thing. Is this anxiety? Well, you know, we're saying it could be, but who knows? We don't know. It doesn't really matter. Like what it is feeling, right? What it is experience, sensation, emotion, like thought, life energy, whatever you want to call it, moving through us. And I think what's just so helpful to see about that is like we've kind of been pointing to here, it's not you. There's nothing you have to do to change it. It's 100% self correcting all the time. When your stomach hurts, your mind might want to go to, oh my gosh, why again? What is this? Why did it take this form? But you just see that. You just see that's okay, that's my mind wanting to grab onto this and tell a mental story about it. But beneath all that chatter, beneath all those explanations, you're fine. You're just a person experiencing some stuff. So the more you can almost be soft with it like that, and just keep it labelless energy moving through you. I think it opens you up to be okay with it, to see a lot about it.
Yeah, and it's good news, because to know what it is, that that's all it is. And you're not a victim to it really, when it's thought in the moment, and thought in the moment has no power in and of itself anyway. So yeah, it too will pass, as all thoughts do. And I imagine you're not having a stomach ache 100% of your day, 24/7.
Yeah, and I always think it's good news too when you notice things starting to take different sneaky paths like this. It's like, oh, like see again, like you're onto it. It's not showing up the way it used to because you've seen through that. Now
Right.
your mind's not going to just roll over and be done with it necessarily. It's going to give you the stomach stuff, but that's okay. Like you can be onto that too as you are. So it's kind of, I don't know. I see it as almost an exciting like sign of like, look, change is happening. Your mind's needing to get really creative to stress you out.
Mm. Yeah, that's a cool way to look at it. That's true.
Can you see these, Jill, if you want? Because the second one from Karen here mentions your book. So if you want to take that one, unless you can't
Yeah,
see them, then I can read it.
I think I can see them. Let's see. Karen, yes. In your book, Jill, you explain how our prior conditioning is made up of thought, and say some thought is unconscious. You also give advice of tracing back through a thought. I have panic attacks and I can't seem to find the source thought, maybe unconscious previous conditioning. So I made the decision to not worry about being aware of the thoughts, but the panic attacks are not getting any better, maybe worse. Yeah. So when I said that in the book about being aware of our thoughts to prove, it's just to prove to yourself, like I was saying before, so you can know 100% that thoughts create our feelings. So like for me, at first I didn't really believe it because it didn't really make sense. How can that be? How can it? But then I would just feel like an anxious thought, and I'd be like, okay, good. This is an opportunity to see if this stuff is really true. And I sort of searched through my mind and said, oh, I was just thinking about whatever, and okay, and then that's why I had that feeling. So for me, I just did that a few times, enough to say, oh, yep, every single time I have this anxiety feeling, there is a thought associated with it. I have to sometimes dig deep. But then once I knew that, it's not helpful really to do that anymore. I don't need to, I don't really want to know what all those weirdo thoughts are in my head. They're still there. So now that I'm positive, it's that's where it comes from. If I feel that anxiety feeling, I might, if I notice it, even sometimes I don't even notice, but if I notice, I'll be just like, oh, I must be having anxious thoughts. Oh, well, and then go back to doing what I'm doing. And, they just go away generally. I mean, I can still get into a big anxiety storm, but yeah, so it's not something that you need to do on an ongoing basis. And that's one thing where, yeah, in my book, that some people have taken it to think, are thinking that that's something they should always be doing. But I don't think generally it's helpful because it can be kind of scary in there.
I love that. I mean, just knowing that it is thought, and it can only be thought ever. And when I say it, I mean whether it's anxiety or depression or anything we're feeling has to be brought by thought. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense. In the beginning, sometimes it is really helpful to see that connection more clearly. But once you start to get a feel for the fact that it can only work that way, like you just know this to be the way life works, then you don't, it definitely doesn't take any
Yeah.
work or,
I like proof. I never take anything on anyone's word. So, and I would always suggest that nobody does. Don't take our word for any of this stuff. And it was the same in my old business too. I always told that to people, like, don't listen to me. You've got to try stuff for yourself and see that it's true, because that you're not going to believe it. It's not going to be as helpful to you if you're just saying, oh, well, Jill says this is true, so okay. But there'll still be a piece of you that doesn't believe it. So yeah, I think that's one way, just to find the proof, find it however, in whatever way works for you.
yeah.
What else do we got?
So there's another one that says, what if we do want to make a change? If we can't use our minds to help achieve this, do we just wait until it happens on its own? Seems non-directed and wishful. It does, and you can use your mind, and you should use your mind. Like, it's not that, like, our minds, our intellect, our conceptual sort of mind that we use to have all these little thoughts all the time is really, really smart. And it's an excellent tool. I mean, it's such a great tool. Thank God we have it. And we do use it. It's just that we have so much more than just that. So we're not at all saying don't use your mind. We're just saying that when your mind has you spinning in circles, if you want to make a change and your mind is just, you're like a hamster wheel on the hamster wheel saying, well, how do I do it? And I don't know what to do. And I don't think it's going to work. And you're on that hamster wheel. That's just your mind spinning in circles. And that isn't helpful. That's where, like Jill was saying earlier, like, we can kind of start to see it and test it for yourself, but see that, okay, when I disengage from all that hamster wheel thinking, and I'm able to trust that clarity and a nicer, like a different way of seeing things and answers, if I need them, are in the space beneath all that thinking, then you just naturally start to go there so much more, and you find what you're looking for. So, but it's not that the mind is a problem, or that we're not using that tool to change. I mean, you get all kinds of really practical ideas, and there's definitely a time and place all the time to think things through and kind of think about it from a more mental place. It's just more of like when you feel that it isn't helping and you feel stuck and you feel bad, that our design is such that feeling is always showing you that it's okay to let go of all that conceptual stuff and go deeper, because deeper is going to be a whole new well of a whole new resource for you.
Yeah, and the thing with trying to think our way out of these things is you're adding more thought on top of thought, because what's causing it to begin with is thought. And so then if you're like, all right, so how do I do whatever, get out of this? And people are so afraid of being passive, but you're adding more thought to it. And so that's only going to put more in your head and give you, more buzzing going on in your head. But, you can, what does seem to be helpful, maybe this is a how to, I don't know, but it's just like knowing if there's a certain thing that you aren't happy with, if you just kind of throw it out there to the universe or whatever, set an intention that this is something it would be great if I would somehow get more info from the universe about, how to solve this problem, and then let it go like that. That's it. Just be like, this is what I want to sort of understand better. And then, go about your business, listen to different videos, but just, that's just kind of there in your mind without it being like I got to do this. And you will be surprised, like the answers will come to you when you're taking a shower, when you're driving in the car, when you're listening to a video, or when you're in the little school of big change. Something will come to you, because it's just there floating in your mind. But if you're trying to work it out, our thinking brain doesn't, you don't need that. It's the wisdom is what the other part of us, that wisdom mind, that we don't have any control over it. Not that we have control over the other part either, but that's, you'll get your answers. Like, just try that. That's my how-to.
Yeah, no, I do that all the time, and it's a great question, Deborah, because it really, like, I'm sure this is a really common question, and I remember when I was first hearing this stuff after coming from a past of like making things happen forever. This felt totally non-directed and wishful. It was like, that's crazy. These people are never going to get anywhere in their lives. They're not relaxing. What are they thinking? but like I saw, like what you're saying, Jill, like I could be in my head, and now it just almost goes by like a feeling, because I used to be in my head and there was tension and it felt sticky in there, and it just felt repetitive and hard, and that never ever got me anywhere. And I would, for anyone, if you're wondering this, just look at that for yourself. Again, I love that kind of theme that's coming out of this call. Like, test this for yourself and see, when you sit and think and think and think and think, does it really help as much as you think it helps, or it seems like it helps? Or is it when you kind of let go of that and go take a break or come back to it later, that you tend to have solutions? And that's just, everyone's kind of
like with a computer problem, if you've ever had that and you're working on it for hours, and then you just go away and come back and boom, you get, suddenly it just comes to you. And that's the same with this too. Like, just, leave it alone for a bit.
And it's a back and forth, right? So it's like you use your intellect, but then you also let go. You don't grab onto it. So like you're like that sort of process, if we want to make it that you said, Jill, that's exactly what I do. Like, I have real change I'm wanting to have happen in my life. And I'm kind of doing that thing of, okay, here's what I would love to have. Now I need to have some ideas, some fresh ideas about that. Done. Now I don't go into my little computer and try to generate those fresh ideas. That's when I take that step back. And then fresh ideas, they show up. Maybe not instantly, maybe it's a week or 2 weeks later or a day later or whenever it is. But when fresh ideas come up, they usually have something kind of practical around them. Call this person, do this, reach out here. So then again, you're sort of back more in your intellect, like using your resources, so it's a really natural kind of back and forth that happens. It's just that we're not only relying on the hard drive. We're recognizing that beyond this little hard drive in our heads, we have this gigantic internet at our disposal, way better than the internet, really. That like, that's what we want to just use them both.
Yeah, totally.
All right, you want to take the next one, Jill, or start with the next one? So how do I eliminate the fear of panic? Nice, easy one for you.
Fear of panic. Is that the whole question? Oh yeah. How do I eliminate the fear of panic? How do I? It's the same as what we're saying. That's what creates panic attacks is getting a little bit of anxiety and then getting scared that it's going to turn into more. And it's just more, lots of thoughts and thoughts. So it's everything that we're saying, just starting to see that it's coming from thought, and that's the only place it can come from, and then letting it go. And, eventually you may have fewer panic attacks or not.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, the how-to question, but also the eliminate, the word eliminate in there, I mean, like Jill said, me too, like we feel stuff. Like I don't know how anyone ever eliminates any feeling. And I think that's always a big thing that kind of is just kind of getting us off track when we're trying to eliminate a feeling. So I get it. I mean, of course we all get it. No one wants to be sitting there fearing your panic all the time, but see if, like, even in your own mind, you can almost kind of soften that a little bit too. Like, okay, I can't eliminate any things. I'm not in control of what shows up, but what shows up is safe. It doesn't always feel that way. You don't always like it, but it is safe because it's energy. It's just thought energy moving through you. So really kind of continuing to see that and test for yourself what we're sharing here and see that as a truth, because you can easily see how something like that, I lived in fear of panic for 3 years straight, and it just feeds on itself. Because then you're afraid, then you're afraid, then you're mad that you're afraid, then you're afraid and there's nothing to be afraid of, and it's like a mess. But kind of seeing it's all just layer and layer and layer of thought, and that it's all of that thought, as scary as it looks and feels, it's going to look and feel a certain way, but that isn't the truth of it. Like there's like how things look, how they feel, how they appear, and then there's what's true, or there's like what's beneath it, and what we know about all people and how these things work. And this fear of panic, it's like it's a habitual thought that looks and feels really true, but it also comes and goes. It passes every time. At some point it passes for you, and you don't have that fear, and you didn't have to do anything or know anything special to make that happen. It's just your nature. So we want to kind of look toward that. Like we were saying earlier, it's like, just notice how what we're sharing here is our nature. Just see it. And then that will deepen your own personal trust and your faith and your belief in all this. Because you could hear us say it all day long, and it's just words if it doesn't look real to you.
There's also something in, like, the not needing to eliminate it, or being okay that you have panic attacks, like it's almost as if until you're okay with it, and that may not be totally true, but it sometimes seems like that if you can just be okay, even though it feels horrible. Part of life is up, we have ups and downs, and we all think we want to just only have the ups, but we can't have the ups without the downs, unfortunately. And we, the more we can be okay with those things, if okay, I'm going to have a panic attack once a month, okay, that's what's going to happen. Or if the more you can be okay with it, it's possible that alone, sometimes suddenly you realize, wait a minute, now I'm only having them once every 6 months, or something like that. And it could be something that goes away, but it's being okay with what is, because what's happening is what's happening, and it's not, we have no choice. We can have it happen and be really, really mad and angry or scared about it, or we can have it happen and be okay with it, not necessarily love it, but being okay with it, because that's what creates our state of mind, is whether we can just be okay with what is, because it is what is.
Yeah. And knowing that in some weird way, like as we become more okay with it, which is usually just because we see it for what it is more, like we know it's just fluctuating thought and it's going to take care of itself and it's not us and all this kind of stuff, like that makes you more okay with it. And as you're more okay with it, it changes, which doesn't mean it goes away, but it's like, I know I used to hear stuff like what you just said, and like, oh, well, when you're okay with, eating this or having this habit or whatever, then it'll go away. And it looked to me like the only option, like just from my thinking in that time, was like, it looked to me like, okay, well, that just means I'm just going to need to suffer. I need to be okay with suffering. But we're not saying be okay with suffering. We're saying as you're okay because you see more about it, it doesn't feel like suffering in the same way.
Right, because that is the suffering. Suffering is the not being okay.
Exactly. The suffering is the fact that we want to eliminate it, and it's not okay. Yeah. It can't happen.
yeah, I feel like suffering is us not being okay with whatever is happening. Like,
Yeah,
and so it doesn't mean being okay with the suffering, because yeah, that's what
exactly.
we
As
just
soon
said.
as you're okay, it's not suffering. It still might be pain. It still might be anxiety. It still might not be your favorite feeling in the world, but it isn't suffering in that same way.
Right. And this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Hanging on to that, this too shall pass, because it will. It always does.
Yeah. All right. I'm curious to see what you say about the next one. So Vanessa asks, is it possible that some people just won't get any insights from the three principles? I've been learning for 6 months and getting nowhere. I can't accept where I am, which we just spoke to, as it's so bad and I have so much wrong with me. And then she also adds that she's tried various therapies and she's on a lot of medication. So Vanessa, I can totally empathize with where you are. And honestly, I had some quick insights from the principles, but then I had a really dark time of thinking, okay, this isn't what I thought it was. And maybe I haven't seen anything. And that is, I don't know that it's the norm, but it sure as heck isn't uncommon, And so like, we see what we see. Like, I don't know what's possible and when you're going to have insights and all that kind of stuff. But what I would want to just share with you is like, don't put pressure on it. I mean, I know it's so hard because you can't accept where you are. You're thinking this is wrong and I have all these problems and I need something from this. But unfortunately, that's like the perfect recipe to be stuck in. I need this to work. I need to see something here, which is like the perfect recipe for not seeing that much besides our own habitual thoughts over and over again. So, it's like most people see something really helpful in this. And I just want to encourage you to keep looking, but without the pressure and without the rush as much as you can help it, and just getting curious, like we were saying earlier, just take it as like, what if there is something to this? Like, what if I am well? Sure, you might not feel well. You have lots of painful thoughts happening all the time. But what if beneath all that psychology, you're perfectly fine? What if? And then just kind of look there and be in that and give that a chance to get bigger. Now, that's hard because that's invisible to you right now. All you see, I'm speaking for you, Vanessa, but like when I was there, all I saw is the pain and the suffering and the problems. I get it. But we have to take some little leap and just say, well, what if I'm okay beneath that? And when that quiets down, I start feeling some okayness coming up. And then just see what you see.
Yeah, and I think if if you've been looking at this for 6 months, you must be seeing something, only because why would you keep looking? Like, if something wasn't ringing true to you, you'd probably have moved on by now to some other thing. So you may not be giving yourself credit, and there also may be changes that have been happening too that you haven't noticed. So you might look to that a little bit. It sounds like you might be just being really hard on yourself. Now, I could be totally wrong. I think for you too, it would be really helpful it's really hard to answer something like this, without actually talking to you, because I think, there's a lot more we could uncover by speaking. So, talking to somebody within this, me, Amy, or anybody else, could be really helpful, just to find out more about your situation. It's just we might be able to see something like, see, look what you did, this did change for you, and you didn't realize it, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Mac says, just as a comment, correct me if I'm wrong, to those struggling with anxiety and panic, thoughts as responses can be automatic. Yes, it's often hard to catch, name, or replace. And our thoughts trigger emotions that have a hormonal basis. There are hormones flooding our body behind aggression, anxiety, stress. So it's about giving our body time to clean up the system from those hormones and not being stuck in your head at the same time, if this makes sense. I change my focus, I get into something different when waiting for a solution. So Mac, I think like I would just say it a little kind of more bottom line way, or like maybe a little more simply, but I think what you're pointing to makes sense, right? So you're kind of saying automatically, right? This stuff happens. That's right on. Like we're not consciously putting anxious thoughts in our head or any kind of thoughts in our head. So yes, it happens. We instantly feel it. Our body instantly does whatever our body does with it. So sets off the chemicals, the hormones, whatever happens physically. So right, there's a whole natural automatic chain of events that happens. And then when you say it's about giving our body time to clean up the system from these hormones and not being stuck in your head, it's almost like what I'm hearing in this is like, yeah, you feel stuff, you don't like it, it has your attention, it kind of has you on red alert. But when you say give your body a time to kind of clean up the system, to me that sounds like, yeah, because it's just going to happen like that naturally. Like if you can feel this stuff, so many people have, physical kind of anxiety symptoms, and sometimes that can feel like its own separate thing, which it isn't. It's just what you're saying here, it's like thought, feeling, physical stuff, they're all one. They're just different manifestations of all that one thought energy. So when that comes up, seeing that, yeah, it will clean out. And when it does, you'll feel different. And even when it doesn't, you're okay because you aren't that. That's the physicalness, and the physicalness is just doing what it does, and it always self-corrects. So it almost gives you a chance to kind of, like you say, wait, get into something else or change your focus while you wait for a solution. The solution is just the natural self-correcting thing that happens all the time. And right, we don't have to be in there with our minds managing that.
Yeah, and knowing that, before we knew any of this stuff, when we'd have those physical symptoms, it just felt like those physical symptoms just kind of came out of nowhere, and knowing that even if we don't know what the thought is and we don't need to know, just knowing that it comes from thought, even though it doesn't feel like it, knowing that just it helps somehow. It helps because now, again, we're not a victim to thought. Name of my book. But because you just know where it's coming from, and thoughts are just so not dangerous. The physical symptoms feel dangerous, and it doesn't mean it's going to stop them from coming by knowing it, but there's something in when you get those feelings. And sometimes too, if the more this stuff too, if you start to feel them coming on before it becomes a full blown, really all the chemicals in the system, just little bits of chemicals, they, if you realize it oftentimes or sometimes they'll pass before they really start flowing, because there's a whole time thing there too. And that's where your wisdom can come in too. If you are feeling that will tell you, go take a nap, go take a run, go to the gym, do whatever, that can help those chemicals to pass through. But there's no one particular thing every single person should do when they're feeling that.
Yeah. I mean, and the bigger thing is, like we've been pointing to, knowing that it happens that way. Knowing that our design is completely self-cleaning. Like it will clean, you're right, it will clear out completely on its own, whether it's a thought, a feeling, a physical sensation. I mean, obviously you have something physically going on, your common sense might say go to the doctor or get this fixed. But like what we're talking about, anxiety, stuff that moves through us, I mean, it all has a momentum in favor of us being healthy and thriving, because that's the truth of us. So that's always a direction things are moving in.
Yep. What else? Good questions.
Yeah, great questions. So really good. And I love everyone saying, like, thanks for that question, I can relate. And yeah, it's good. This is always the best part, is to just kind of hear what's on people's minds. And again, feel free. We have a little time still if you guys want to go ahead and if you haven't yet, if you want to put a question in the chat, we can take as many as we have time for. I'll read this one because it's about binge eating. So I'm a binge eater, and I've read the little book, A Big Change. When your mind is racing or ruminating, like you're on a hamster wheel about a problem at work or with your family, how do you not indulge in your comfort foods without using willpower? You're thinking about the problem, and that's triggering an urge or compulsion for chocolate. Okay.
I know you already have a bunch of Ask Amy's on that very thing, right?
Yes, I do. But because it's a great, common question. Yeah. So when your mind, so you say, you're on this hamster wheel, a lot of thought going on, And then kind of added into that is all this thought about, hey, chocolate would be really good right now. Chocolate would help you not have to think about these problems so much right now, like just knowing. Again, there's no strategy. There's nothing I can give you that's like, okay, here's what you're going to pull out in those moments and apply. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. It would never work that way. But what you can start to see in the bigger picture, or continue to see in the bigger picture, is that all that thinking, whether it's about the stress at work or the problems at home or wanting chocolate or wanting to binge, or how do I not use willpower? How do I get out of this? It's all the same. All of it. It's just all a busy mind going. It's all that conceptual tool that we're saying is a great tool at times, but it's that tool is taken over. And that tool, the beautiful thing about it is as soon as you just don't worry about it and you're not in there trying to talk it down or fix it or argue with it, it just tends to settle down. So you just, again, it's not a how-to, but the way it comes to mind for me right now is you just look away from all that garbage. Like you just best you can as you see this, no, it's all the same thing. When you feel like that, you don't want to listen to any of that. You let your mind settle down, and you know that as things settle down, you'll do what you do. And, again, like we were saying earlier, there's nothing wrong with willpower as a tool also. It's just not a way that anyone's ever going to have sustainable change, because no one has that much willpower. It's an exhaustible resource. Mm-hmm. And when you're stressed out is when it's being exhausted. So you really don't have willpower in that situation. So it's a perfect time to just see all this is there, but just do your best to kind of know that it's moving through. It's just thought. It's not all that stuff out there. It's just thought. It's moving through. And, give yourself a minute.
And it's just thought. It's not you. We think that crazy person in our head, or the one telling us to eat and eat and eat, is us, because it sounds like us and it's lived with us, our whole lives. But the more you can start to see it's not us, like oftentimes it's our mother's voice, or somebody else in our life. It's so not us. Again, we are what's underneath all that. And it's like a parasite. It's like something that's taken over our body, especially in those times where it's some kind of addictive thing. It's just some thing taking over our body, wanting to get its way. But you can think of it in various ways: a parasite, a child, a crazy person, like whatever works for you. But and some people like to befriend it. Some people just want to go away. There's different. Again, there's no how to, but seeing more and more that isn't you at all seems to be helpful for me too.
It's a huge piece of it, because otherwise we are left. And again, this is about anything, anxiety, any feeling we're feeling, habits, it's otherwise we're left kind of feeling like we're arguing with ourselves, or like we aren't us. And then you just like, what do I do with that? like this thing is like, this is just me. And it just gets so messy there. So I think that's a really huge piece of what Jill and I share and talk about so much, is like, you come to see that you aren't any experience. This experience is always changing. And there's a you that's been there since you've been born. You've experienced tons of change also. You've grown up, your body's grown up, your mind has matured, all kinds of things have happened. But there's an us in there that's like invisible. There's a sense of like a consciousness that's there, that has never, ever once changed. No matter what you're going through, it just has never changed. It can't. It doesn't. And that's kind of where I want to say look toward it, which is just funny because it's not, you can't see it, but you can feel it. You can sense it in there. And when you know that's there, then yeah, it becomes much easier to have your mind and your feelings doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but for you to kind of not get as caught up in it.
It's kind of cool, like letting stuff unfold, because I'll have a certain idea, like just today, this is a silly example, but like I had my bar class earlier at noon, and my plan was I'm going to come home and make sure I take a shower so I'll look, okay for this webinar thing. But then I that crazy person inside of me tried to convince myself, oh, you don't need to take a shower. So what if you have your ponytail on or whatever during the thing? But that, and then so I was recognizing all this going on, and I didn't know what was going to happen. This was like as I was driving home, and I kind of was like curious, well, what's going to happen? Am I going to take a shower? Am I not going to take a shower? What's going to happen? And I just came home, went upstairs, took a shower. Like it just happened, and that's really all the time. It's the same with like the binge eating or anything. I imagine I've not had that, but it just get curious, like, okay, who's gonna win, or what's gonna happen? Like, be curious about it, because if you just let it unfold, you'll be surprised how you go there's no better or worse, but let's call it the better route, or the thing that's better for you, perhaps.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful place to be when we're sitting there kind of hearing it play out, and we're curious because we're the curious one. And that shows us that we're not the other one.
Yeah. And it can literally, like, it literally could have gone either way for me. I wouldn't have been surprised either way. It's interesting. I try to live more and more that way, and which I think is how we're designed to live.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to get overridden by the cuckoo bird.
Yeah. I love in here, Mel says, if the inner dialogue was really you, why on earth would it be so mean to yourself? I mean, that I heard someone say the other day, he was a former addict and he works with addicts and stuff. And he was saying, like, he realized that all addicts had the same thought. I mean, all people have the same thoughts. We all do have the same thoughts, right? But he kind of realized, like, wow, how did that person get my thoughts? And if they have my thoughts, like, or maybe these aren't actually my thoughts, and that was like, wait a minute, it's kind of what Mel's saying here. Like, if it's you, like, why would we just walk around bashing ourselves and scaring ourselves and worrying ourselves? We wouldn't. And it's not anything evil either. It's just a mind that wants to fix things and solve problems and be analytical and like that. It's just where it kind of goes. But the more you can see, yeah, there's a whole you that's not that. I mean, it's just, everything gets so much easier.
And we do that's like so important. We all do have the same thoughts. I've really found that when people see that they're not the only ones, because we all live in our own little head, and just assume everyone looks fine outside of us. They all look like they've got it all together. They don't binge eat. They don't do this. They don't drink too much. Look at them. They're all perfectly cool and happy. No, they're all crazy too. they're like everybody has those thoughts. Everybody. They may come in slightly different flavors, but and something about knowing that is really helpful.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue. We'll make this the last question. Nicholas asks, he says, sorry if it's a heavy question. That's okay. I'm curious about how this understanding can help people with suicidal thoughts. It sounds to me that this can be very helpful. It definitely can. Do you have any experiences or examples of this? Totally. So yeah, I mean, I know it feels like a heavy question and people get kind of like worried when you start talking about suicide, but it's a thought, exactly like we're saying, and people like, we all are capable of having any kind of thought, and they come and go. And sometimes they look really big and serious, and sometimes they look like great ideas. Other times they don't look as big or serious, or they don't look like such a great idea. But it's so helpful for people to kind of see that what we think doesn't mean anything important. Like, because you're thinking I should go eat that entire cake or I should kill myself, that doesn't mean, like, that's not you. It's not giving you valuable information about your life. It's not, if it comes with a heavy feeling like that, it's actually showing, okay, your mind is going off, and the heavy feeling is there to kind of help us not take things quite so seriously. So it's like anything people can see around this about just learning to not take their thinking so seriously. It's so helpful, especially when they're big thoughts like that. And I'll just mention a little plug for my Freedom series at the end here. I do a Freedom series before my Little School of Big Change launches, whenever it launches. And that's going to start next Tuesday. And one of the conversations is with a woman named Judy, who had suicidal thoughts her whole life. She planned her own suicide, I don't know, multiple times. And from seeing this understanding, it has shifted so much. So Nicholas, I would really refer you to that. Like, it's a, I don't know, half-hour conversation with this woman. And she just shares it in such a great way, how she still, those thoughts will still come up once in a while, but it just doesn't look the same. She knows it's her mind going to a familiar place, and it doesn't feel like that idea is coming from her anymore like it used to. And, and it has just changed so much for her.
Mm. Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. That those I haven't personally experienced those kinds of thoughts, like even depression too much. But it's just another flavor of thought. It's depression, and it's just, instead of anxiety, it's depression. It hits different people in different ways. Some people have anger, or some people have all of them. Um, but we're always trying to feel that peace that's in us, one way or another. We're always trying to escape those thoughts and feel better. And whether it's drinking or shopping or sex or thinking that, killing ourselves is the answer, we're just looking for that way out to feel better. But the more we do understand this, the less we have that need, because we start to see that peaceful feeling is there and accessible anytime. Because if it's our thoughts creating how we feel, not what's happening outside of us, then it's there always. No, we can access that. It doesn't feel like it when we're in the middle of depressed thoughts or anxious thoughts, but to know, to have that inner knowing that it is there, is just really helpful.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm so glad so many of you could join us live. It was awesome. Awesome to talk with you. And thanks, Jill. It was fun to do this with you. And I hope it was helpful for people.
Yeah, that was great. It was really fun, and I'm happy so many people came. Just a plug for my book, Victim of Thought: Seeing Through the Illusion of Anxiety. It's available on Amazon, and yeah, and also there's a Facebook group that goes with the book. But it's, anyone who's interested in this understanding could join it as well. Just look up Victim of Thought on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great book. Really great forward. Just kidding. I wrote the
Yes,
forward.
Amy wrote the forward.
But
Oh,
no,
and my blog is what did you do with Jill.com, to which you might want to sign up for.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great way to just see more about what we're sharing. And I also have my Little School of Big Change. Go to littleschoolofbigchange.com, and if you're interested in seeing more about all this, that's another great way to do it. It's a course and a community and lots of good stuff there. We talk a lot about habits and anxiety and everything we shared here on this webinar. That
Yeah.
was great. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for making it. Really, really great talking with you. Hope it was helpful.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.